I mean, Top of the Pops is Top of the Pops. I felt that kind of buzz again.
I was actually terrified the first time I did Top of the Pops.
It's a very exciting feeling.
I was incredibly excited.
I remember a shiver of fear.
Oh my God, this is unbelievable.
It's like waiting to go in to have your teeth removed.
Its history makes it that much more special.
Yes, it's number one. It's Top of the Pops.
Everyone remembers their first time. For me as a kid watching Top of the Pops, I remember the extraordinary outfits, the amazing makeup and provocative dance routines of Adam and the Ants, whilst my dad enjoyed Legs & Co. Come to think of it, pretty much for the same reasons. The fact is, it's always been a family affair. In the words of a certain 42-year-old mother of two, music makes the people come together. And it's been that way since Top of the Pops began. One New Year's Day, almost 40 years ago. 1963, teenagers had only just been invented, and for the first time, young British bands like the Beatles, the Hollies and the Rolling Stones were storming the UK charts. The new ITV service had the hip and trendy Ready Steady Go, and Auntie Beeb could no longer ignore the demands of screaming pop fans. Under pressure from their own kids, BBC bosses in London gave the go-ahead for a pop show, as long as it was at the other end of the M6, in Manchester, in somewhat hallowed surroundings.
Dickinson Road was a church, and it was built like any other church, and the studio was obviously the main part where the congregation would be. We used to call it Pray TV.
I don't really remember a thing, can you?
Well, I just remember that it seemed rather strange to be doing a programme like Top of the Pops in what had been a church. Not that there was anything sacrilegious about the programme.
Oh, I don't know about
that. It just seemed rather odd.
On the first show, Dusty Springfield, the Hollies, the Dave Clark Five, and those lovable layabouts, the Rolling Stones.
Somehow we arrived at this complex in Manchester and nobody knows what's happening. There's big chimney, you know. More peroxide, chimp. Yeah, it's going off a bit round the back.
I remember first seeing the board at the back of this round table where Jimmy sat, and it had all the list of the Top of the Pops numbers that were in the charts at that particular time.
It was a great ramshackle at the beginning, you know, because everyone was making it up as they went along.
For all of you, from all of us here, a fabulous, fantastic BYRDS, the Birds, and here they come with this.
With the public's insatiable desire to follow the charts, 25 million people tuned in each week to see their favourite acts miming along to their hits.
Simplify you, classify you. When they realised that to go on Top of the Pops meant the difference in between a record being at number 12 and being at number 1, then of course it soon overnight turned that people would kill to get on Top of the Pops.
After I think it was the second show, Brian Epstein phoned me and said, I quite like that show you're doing. Is there any chance of playing the boys' records? Yeah, sure, if they turn up at Dickinson Road. And he said, do you know what would happen if the Beatles turned up at Dickinson Road? I said, yes, I do.
I think all of us who were making records at the time realised that we needed a showcase for us when we were in the charts. You know, apart from anything else, it did sell records. And therefore, it was obviously an important innovation into our industry.
Kingdom, nothing at all, my love.
It became so big and so popular that everybody was ringing up and saying, can so-and-so appear, can we do this, can we do that? So I worked out right from the beginning a set of rules. Anybody in the top 20 who was going up as opposed to going down could be featured in the show.
And they would have to call up and say, you know, sorry, Stones, you've dropped one, you can't do the show. So people watched to see. It was a competition. It was like a sporting event almost. It kept you wanting to see it next week.
It was kind of the religious thing to do for everybody to tune in, I should say, on the night.
Those were very heady days because, you know, I think the Beatles would be going up there or the Stones would be there, and, you know, I was after all 14 or 15, just 15 I think. And like every other teenager in the world, I was like,
I happen to have only one memory of Top of the Pops that really sticks out in my mind, and that was the time that Tom Jones appeared on the program.
When you get your hit record and you're on Top of the Pops, you know, it's a very exciting feeling.
And I always remember him standing outside the studio waiting to go in beforehand, and this great big physique, and I thought, wow, you're going to knock 'em cove.
It was a way to get across to the people, you know, I mean, because it covered so much ground. You know what I mean? It was in every household in, you know, in the United Kingdom.
It's all about sex. Sex appeal is really important when you're a performer, and he's had loads of it, and plenty to spare.
Top of the Pops was perfect for me because I could get my thing across.
I remember Diana Ross in particular.
Yes, they absolutely captivated us all when they came to the studio because they were so hugely professional, and the way these American groups like Diana Ross and the Supremes, they were actually rehearsed to perfection.
They were dolls. They never moved. They had this amazing hairdo, and occasionally they would go, like that, in unison, in unison, and that was them.
But the stars couldn't always turn up for the show, so Top of the Pops had to create a few stars of its own and add a bit more sex appeal.
Lots of my friends say, Joe, everyone talks about Pan's People, and you started the Gojos. You know, you were the first, you were pioneers, really, on Top of the Pops.
Sometimes you get people that that made great records, perhaps, but hadn't got a great personality. But they used the girls to enhance the record. And I think that was a good idea.
Even that name Gojos is very 60s, you know. They mostly wore those boots, you know, the white boots to the knee, and short skirts as much as possible, and the camera would go up the skirts, and, you know, it was all very risque.
Reflections of the way life used to be.
And the pop groups there would say to us, "Are you a group?" They would say, "Gojo, are you a group?" We said, "No, we're dancers." You know, and they were all a bit mystified about these three dancers. They thought we were a singing group, I think.
And the show was very much, at that point, pretty much a teeny bopper type show. It wasn't, when it moved to London, it became chic, it became stylish, it became introduced by Pan's People. Wonderful choreographer called Flick Colby.
The idea of Pan's People was that we were 6 dancers and a choreographer, and rather like the Beatles or the Rolling Stones or something, you couldn't just hire Ringo, or, you know, and not hire the rest of them. You had to hire all of us. So we were a group, and that was kind of cool.
Flows and flows of angel hair and ice cream castles in the air.
Some of those dance routines were a bit weird, but on the other hand, you see, Flick Colby had to come up with a different dance routine every single week.
Often you'd end up doing 2 routines in 1 week, but then it would mean costumes would have to be changed, the set would have to be changed, and everything. So it was quite tough work, especially for Flick, who had to keep coming up with the ideas.
It was kind of like working for MGM. You had a full-service studio, and they really did help us. But, you know, if the record drops and you have to start over and you have 6 or 7 hours, that's what you have.
People were either writing in to sort of find out about the hairstyles, the costumes, or more about the girls individually. Very, very popular, and I think very popular with the dads. Definitely with the dads.
The move to London put the show at the heart of the swinging 60s. It was the place to show off the looks and moves of the time.
It had that very hip image to it, I think.
I I don't know why they thought London was more hip than Manchester. Do you, Manchester?
Top of the Pops was a catalyst for the swinging 60s, and it represented a great period of music.
I'd just like to give a pound to someone who could stand up and explain to me I Am the Walrus by the Beatles.
I did like the fashions. I didn't like the flower power fashions and the hippies, and I didn't really like the mentality of the hippies.
Flour, well, it's made everything smell nice, I suppose.
We skip the line, fandango. Turn cartwheels across the floor.
Performers and audience were looking for something a bit more. They were almost looking for something that was spiritual. So they came up with message songs.
The room was humming harder.
How's about something different?
Psychedelic.
Brian Auger, Julie Driscoll. This wheel's on fire, baby.
The fashion thing also was a big part of the swinging 60s. And of course, here in this country, we were setting all the trends, you know. The British were at the head of all that, you know. Vidal Sassoon with the hair, Mary Quant, Bieber with the fashion. And yeah, it was, so you had to kind of wear something that was really hip on the shows, and everyone was looking at everybody else's outfits.
We want you to watch now, because we're going to pick out the best dancer, and we're going to judge during this one, because we're going to see the kids dancing here in the studio.
One of my jobs was to go around the London clubs in the evening with a handful of Top of the Pops tickets, looking for suitable dancers and going up and saying, would you like 4 tickets for Top of the Pops?
So to me, the audience was enormously important for the fashions.
The ones that dressed the best, and they were encouraged to dress the best, were given tickets to come back the following week.
Well, those are the sort of things you wear down Carnaby Street. You don't think so? I think they're absolutely magnificent.
So a lot of the kids actually were the fashion gurus of their day.
Everybody that was there wanted to look their best, and there was a lot of that prima donna business and a lot of that priming. If they ever thought a camera was there, they'd give it.
I remember on one Top of the Pops we had Peter Maranello, who'd just been transferred to Arsenal, and he was handing out prizes to the best dancer.
Well, you've been chosen as the best dancer here. What's your name?
Linda.
Linda, well, congratulations. I'd like to present you with the records.
Thank you very much.
Hello, what's your name?
Celia.
Well, your eyes are fabulous.
This year, 1967, can no other than the one and only the Rolling Stones, and here they come right now.
One time, to get into Television Centre, such was the excitement amongst the teenagers that the Stones came in bins in the back of a refuse truck.
Don't you worry about what's on your mind, oh man. I'm in no hurry, I can take my time, oh.
Fan mania for bands like the Beatles and the Stones, plus the demands of international touring, meant that it wasn't always possible to appear live on Top of the Pops. This version of Let's Spend the Night Together was shot in another studio, especially for the show, and was a forerunner of what we know today as the pop video. The 70s. TV changed to colour, Top of the Pops got a new theme tune, and the show was taken over by a bunch of DJs from the groovy Radio 1. By now, the show was a powerhouse of pop, and always a talking point for families gathered round their TV set.
You know, Monday in school, you'd think Top of the Pops is on a Thursday, can't wait.
Good evening and welcome to, what was it?
And inevitably it was always rubbish, but you know, the memory of it and the anticipation.
Top of the Pops. Pops!
When they used to have the chart rundown, you know, from 30 to number 1, and you'd sit there going, good, crap,
Because I remember really being particularly annoyed with Dave Lee Travis, because he'd go on and on.
I've got a black belt at Ludo, me, I'm heavy.
It was most definitely an event in our house, which is an event for me.
My dad just sitting there going, not this again, and it'd been #1 for weeks and weeks and weeks.
I did want to be in the audience, you know, and I used to hear that there was a big kind of waiting list for 4 years or something. I don't know if I remember them being glamorous, but I suppose anyone next to the likes of Jimmy Savile did look like they were quite glamorous.
So sad, so sad.
It brought a little bit of a discussion in our house. That's as intellectual as our household got, was discussing Top of the Pops.
My mother turned to me and she said, "Don't you want to do something like that, son?" I said, "No."
This karma's gonna get you. Gonna knock you on the head. You better get yourself together. Because you're gonna be dead.
John Lennon wanted to do Instant Karma live. Wow, okay.
Life in the faces of love.
Yoko was in fact wearing a sanitary towel around her eyes as a blindfold.
Yeah, you. This karma's gonna get you. Gonna look you right in the face.
It was art. Yoko's art.
The parade of 70s superstars continued. In fact, do you recognise this face?
He rocks in the treetop all day long. I've been rhyming and singing his song. I do the banners on Jaybird Street. Love me the rhyming and go tweet, tweet, tweet.
This little kid, if you like, was just there, dressed in the sort of bright orange top and coming out and spinning around. Do you remember that cool thing? They used to just spin and grab the mic and just move and sing like that. A rock a robin, ooh, a rock a rock. And they were everybody, they were so slick and clean, and everybody in my house, in the Black Harriet household, was up grooving.
Rock your robin, hey, rock, rock, rock your robin. Go rock your robin, 'cause the wind's gonna rock the night.
The whole nation was grooving.
When glam rock came along, I thought that was wonderful. You know, glam rock to me is what it all is all about.
There's a starman waiting in the sky. He told us not to blow it, 'cause he knows it's almost what he told me.
Bowie I never got to know, but Bolan particularly got to know really well. I used to love Mark, he was fantastic.
Mark Bolan, you know, he loved the dressing up, he loved the visuals, he loved those type of things. Something different, just to be different, you know, different bright colours and jackets and things. He loved performing. He loved the tempo, Like the old saying that, you know, you open the fridge door, you do 25 minutes.
Everybody else was dressing more outrageously, so you'd go on better.
So here it is, Merry Christmas, everybody's having fun.
Especially Dave Hill in our band. I mean, he would not let anybody outdo him.
It's only just begun.
Sweet were a perfect case in point. Sweet got more and more outrageous with every TV.
We just haven't got a clue what to do.
But Dave would never be having none of it. He wanted to be the most outrageous, and he achieved it. Things socially and economically were very poor. There was a lot of power cuts, the miners were on strike, loads of strikes going on. And I think people in those sort of times turn to showbiz. They want to be taken into fantasy land, and I think the glam rock era let people go into fantasy land.
Glitter might have been some people's fantasy, but the teenage girls watching had other things on their mind.
It would stir up fan controversy, and it was no longer a secret that the Osmonds would be at the television set. It would be announced through the fan area to cause as much chaos as we could in W12.
Well, all teeny bopper days were exciting, and exciting not only in the studio but in the centre, because the commissionaires were fighting off all the young people who were trying to climb over the walls into the television centre.
used to get them confused slightly with the Osmonds, because they were quite alike. And I remember distinctly singing along to the Bay City Rollers. That horribly uncool me.
It was the only time that all 5 entrances at Television Centre were besieged. Not only could nobody could get in, nobody could get out. There were screaming dervishes at every single gate.
Take a little love. Be prepared to forsake a little love. And when the sun comes shining through, we'll know what to do.
They were my favourite band, and they were on bonnets of cars. Do I need to explain anything more? Life doesn't get much better.
And from that time, the BBC put a dictum out that no group of any size would ever record at Television Centre again.
Of course, there's nothing like a good boy band to set teen pulses racing. But Top of the Pops was supposed to be a family show. So what about something for the grannies?
I can't even remember what act I was doing, but I walked in and there was Bing Crosby.
My life is like an open book, and as I glance back through its pages...
And I went over to the dressing room and I met him, you know. It was fantastic. He was a real gentleman.
I'm shocked to see that I took wages.
I was directing that programme myself, and I suddenly looked up and I thought, oh, I know that face. And then I looked back and saw what was going on, and eventually I realised that it was Edward Heath. He had heard that Bing Crosby was appearing on Top of the Pops, and he particularly asked to come down to the studios.
I had a tap on the shoulder, and it was Edward Heath. He said, do you think you could get Bing Crosby's autograph for me?
I've known success, some mild acclaim.
You know, you were in the presence of somebody that was bigger than anybody could be in the room.
I seem to remember that he wouldn't go back to his dressing room after he had rehearsed it, because he was very interested in Pan's People.
Go, girls, go.
Bing Crosby, the girls to which he was referring are, of course, Pan's People.
In the days when I was directing, you'd say to, hey guys, can I have a close-up of one of the girls, you know, 4 or 6 cameras, boom, all into band.
You said go chill, never down my spine. It's for thrills, and you draw the line, oh baby. 'Cause your mama showed you that love and pride.
Pan's People had to come to an end, and we had another group called Ruby Flipper for 6 months, which we put a couple of boys in. But we were all aware that the value of Pan's People was as a girls' group. So we then formed Legs & Co.
Did we have costume, or was it anything of it? We were stuck. All this little flimsy outfit was stuck with toupee tapes so that we weren't exposing ourselves in any way.
It could go from the sublime to the ridiculous. I mean, one week you could be wearing the sequins, the fake furs, the diamonds.
If I said you have a beautiful body, would you hold it against me?
And the next week you're running around with a loaf of French bread in your hand.
I will be quite honest that Flick Colby, who was a wonderful choreographer, and I used to actually discuss that we probably needed to do a gym slip version every so often, or a raincoat version or something, because that intrigued a certain audience.
We'd come out of the studio, we'd take off our makeup, and we'd go and wait for the bus,
Yes,
didn't
I
we?
was
We'd get the
with the train,
train.
the train to the East
White
End.
City. Yes, that's right. It was fine. It was fine. It took months and months and years Get and years used to before they were, it. and then suddenly they'd say, "You own thing of like." And I used to say, It's funny you should say It was that. I lovely. do look like her, don't I? Did you?
I always swore that I could turn the sound down on Top of the Pops, and I'd know which song they were doing.
I can't stand the rain against my window.
it was often choreographed directly to the song, line by line.
Yes, exactly. My heart bleeds.
Some of the routines were literal. Some of the music was very literal.
The punk scene was really fun, you know, because we had to do punk numbers,
Sex
like
Pistols.
Sex Pistols,
Yeah.
and that was really a fun time because it was so alternative, you know, and it was so angry.
I think it was kind of outrageous, and it was our chance to take the mickey just a little bit.
We had brightly coloured wigs,
Yeah,
didn't we?
everything.
Brightly coloured kind of dresses, and then all really weird tights and things, and just completely bizarrely dressed.
Now, hang on. Legs and Co go punk? Surely something's gone very wrong here. Of course, real punks like the Sex Pistols and the Clash never did Top of the Pops. And let's face it, Top of the Pops was never really a stage for true anarchy. The show preferred more well-behaved rebels who could turn it on right on cue.
Here's Sham 69 and Angels with Dirty Faces.
Hello, Mum. Who's on Top of the Pops again then, eh?
I try and block punk rock out of my mind, you know, I hated it.
Angels with dirty faces. Angels for no one plays these streets like me. Angels.
I'm always amazed at that punk period because we're led to believe that all punk bands were wild, woolly and spat on people, and I suppose some of them did. But I was always amazed that you'd meet people who were actually fairly ordinary and that a lot of it was an act.
With punk, I think Top of the Pops were ignoring it at the start and carrying on as if this is all going to fade away. But once punk got big, I think then they started getting the bands up. It was more the new wavy stuff, really, that was getting on, which followed on from punk.
I think that we felt ourselves part of the time period and relevant, and I think that our attitudes, we shared, you know, our attitudes were similar, although our music was not strictly punk.
Yeah, that's the one with the striped dress. That's the one that sticks in my head. Yeah, with the tinsel falling from the ceiling.
It was time for a new, stricter regime. Legs and Co got their marching orders and the non-stop party of 80s excess began. Just as soon as the cameras were rolling, anyway.
When I took over Top of the Pops, I was going to make some changes. The idea of putting a party atmosphere to the show was that the viewer felt they were part of the show and that they were actually there enjoying it.
Bit of an authoritarian figure, I always felt. The idea that he was a man who generated a party atmosphere, I don't remember that at all.
It started to look rather like an American political convention. They'd have professional dancers there, and they put the professional dancers on rostrums.
We had flags and balloons and streamers and just that atmosphere, a real party. The only thing that was missing was the drinks, which I think we had later.
If they're given hats and blowers and they can, you know, weave them around a bit, it actually helps alleviate some of the inhibitions.
That's part of the psychology of being in the TOTP audience, that, you know, you might get on TV and your mum might see you.
The atmosphere went down a couple of notches, I thought. They were behaving the way that they were told. And there was people diving in and out saying, if you don't move more, you won't get a ticket next week. And all that. So what was all that about? That's not Top of the Pops. That's a factory, and that could only happen in London. If they'd tried that in Manchester, they got chinned. And quite rightly so.
There's definitely two sides to the Top of the Pops experience. You know, there's what you see on the screen, the glamour, the glitz, you know, the fantastic pop stars, and And then in the 80s, there was the dreary canteen of BBC Television Centre and the extras from Tenko.
It was all run very strictly. Often Michael Hurl would come tearing down, who was the producer at that time, from the gallery to berate us with phrases like, "You're an embarrassment to yourself and to the BBC."
You're an embarrassment.
This is very 1984, though. This Frankie Goes to Hollywood.
Take it away, boys! At the mature age of 20, you'd have thought that Top of the Pops was unshockable. But there were still some things which made Auntie B blush.
Frankie Goes to Hollywood had already done Top of the Pops with Relax.
It was one of those things where you're in school the next day and you go, you know, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, eh? And you go, you know what it's about.
Relax, don't do it when you want to go to it. Relax.
When people ask me about Frankie, I said, do you want the truth or do you want the myth?
It was Mike Reed who took it on his own shoulder there to try and boost his ratings by becoming this moral crusader.
Well, who would I protest to? Mike Reed?
The myth, of course, is that I banned it. The truth, of course, is that I wasn't in a position to ban it. The BBC were.
For me, the BBC was a completely faceless monolith.
When you think about it in this day and age, it is quite innocent.
I think doubtless it contributed to the success of the record, not only in England, but in other territories.
Mike Reed made Frankie Goes to Hollywood.
It did improve the band's image in a sense, yeah.
By the end of the year, Frankie was unbanned and back in the Pops family, celebrating at the ultimate Christmas party of the 80s.
The great moment of my life was Band Aid. It was a Christmas show, and we got together nearly everybody who had appeared in the original Band Aid.
It's Christmas time. There's no need to be afraid.
He came storming into our dressing room, Bob, saying, "I've sold more records than you now." But he was very pleased with himself that, you know, he'd had this idea for Band Aid and he'd managed to outsell Frankie Goes to Hollywood.
Throw your arms around the world at Christmas time.
I think the Band Aid thing, actually, we were on that when half the people weren't there, and I believe Paul Weller was singing Bono's bit.
Well, tonight, thank God it's them instead of you.
When you consider how many people were involved with it, and a lot of people that were very successful at the time, it was incredibly good-natured and really well-organised.
The girls from Orange Alani, what they call Barana Nama, our toes got stamped on so bad by those girls. There's a lot of that going on, you know. Isn't that worth it to get in the front of the camera? So I got to stay at the back. Well, I won't say any more, it was mad.
Top of the Pops had been a stronghold for Radio 1 DJs since the 60s. This was the age of the real smashy and nicey. But thankfully, there were one or two rebels in the ranks, presenting the show with tongues firmly in their cheeks.
It was regarded as a kind of a shop window, mainly for yourself, but also, you know, for Radio 1 too. And so
you might get your own chat show out of it, really, basically. That's what people thought, isn't it?
That's right, that's right.
Through the Burke and Hare of British Broadcasting, I'm John. He's the likeable Canadian.
Well, I think basically it was that really neither of us really gave a toss about it, in a sense. We didn't see it as kind of an important career move. I certainly didn't. I think he probably did a bit. So we rather took the mickey out of it.
And this week we're going to kick off Amigos with Incantation and Cachapaya.
You could tell he wasn't like 100% into some of the acts who were on, but he obviously couldn't say, I personally think this group's rubbish, but he put so little enthusiasm into introducing them that you got the message.
John, I think I'll let you introduce this next act, because I know they're important to you. You play them a lot on your show.
This has meant a lot to me, I must admit. This is a very important moment in my life, really. Keith Harris and Orville.
And there's a wonderful time, of course, when John Peel and I, we were presenting.
And if that doesn't get to number one, I'm going to come and break wind in your kitchen. Now the top 10.
You know, it's not kind of the waspish thing. It doesn't get into books of quotations and things. It's not a fantastically clever thing to say.
I just burst out laughing.
And the next thing was Michael Hurl wasn't actually directing that week, he was in Australia.
Apparently he was woken in his, whatever the Australian equivalent of the Novotel is, in the middle of the night and, alerted as to the extraordinary danger to national security that had been engendered by my making this remark about breaking wind in people's kitchens.
Just him being so deadpan in a kind of supposedly party atmosphere. I always quite liked that.
But despite the efforts of the heroic John Peel, Top of the Pops was still indulging in 80s decadence, with everyone trying harder and harder to get noticed.
It's the real bad 80s clothing, the kind of dodgy hair, the no rhythm dancing, the clothes turquoise white.
Well, it was Thatcher's Britain, really, wasn't it? And people they showed off the fact that they had money. It was a greedy time, but it was terribly ostentatious. And so all of the fashions represented politically, I think, what was going on there.
Silly waistcoats and great big hair. And I thought that looked good.
It was lip gloss, big hair, hairspray.
I was just as much a victim as the artists, and so was everyone.
As the excesses continued, 3 men created a highly efficient production line of pop, and Top of the Pops became a shop window for the hit factory.
We never took Top of the Pops for granted. You know, we always saw that you had 3 minutes to give it your greatest shot. That's what you had. And to us, the whole combination of what we did was aimed at that 3 minutes on a Thursday night. And I've seen incredible instances where Kylie is absolutely knackered, just got off a flight, yet the minute the red light comes on the camera, she blossoms. You know, when she walked on that Top of the Pops floor, the whole place lit up. And she took over.
I just remember having this terrible outfit on, but that's not really that different to a lot of my TV appearances.
Nobody knew that Kylie and Jason were an item. So therefore, by doing a duet, was sort of confirming that they were an item, which they'd taken great pains to sort of hide.
In the mid-80s, the show got a visit from Mrs. Thatcher. And in true Maggie style, she hit upon a controversial issue that's vexed generations of Pop's viewers. Why do they all mime?
It was one of her visits to the centre, and she spent nearly an hour trying to make me say that they did not sing live.
Gave up your friends for a new way of life, and both ended up as ex-husband and wife. There were 22 catches when you struck your matches.
I think if you're out there and you are an artist and it is possible to sing live, you should. It's not fair to your fans to mime to a record.
I think they should mime everything. I don't think anybody should be allowed to sing live on it. What do I want to hear bloody the singers live for? What do I hear? I want to hear them out of tune? No, thank you very much.
If that is your chosen profession and you're a singer, then come on, let's hear you sing.
The kids don't give a monkeys. The kids want to see their pop stars on television performing. Why would you want to put them in a surrounding where they don't sound very good?
I wasn't really a very good live performer, so yeah, it was about what it looked like.
I would never allow any of my acts to sing live on Top of the Pops. Not because I can't sing live, but you can't record it. You don't have time. I spend hours and hours and hours with a singer trying to get, them to sound good. You put them in a cold studio with people standing in front of them, trying to dance, and you're asking them to sing. No, sorry, that ain't right.
Julianne Reagan has got a beautiful voice, and she is part of All About Eve. They're at 22, aren't they? Martha's Harbour! Yeah.
Then came the great miming disaster of 1988.
It was a live Top of the Pops, but they weren't singing live. And you could hear this track. You could on the telly, but they weren't hearing it in the studio.
I sit by the harbour.
So she was just like that. Wonder what I'll get for tea tonight. Maybe I'll get the chippy on the way home.
I hide in the water.
Just let it go. And it went on and on and on until it finished, and then people didn't know what to do.
And these two didn't help the situation much either.
I got fed up with everybody miming, and I got this sort of buzz back that, the public didn't like to be conned, So everybody who came into the studio then sang live.
You'd better hope and pray that you wake one day in your own well.
But new rules were the least of the show's worries. The kids were dancing to a different beat. And why go and sing live on Top of the Pops when you can just send in your highly polished video?
All the people that I met that were running Top of the Pops were a little bit like Nigel Havers. They were kind of, oh, hello. Oh, you're the host, are you? And I'm thinking, where are the cool people?
Did seem to be a fair quotient of older people working on the show.
It became fashionable to say, well, it's square, it's not cool to watch Top of the Pops.
Ratings were on the slide, so the BBC decided to recruit hip and trendy young presenters who were more in touch with youth culture. Sadly, they were busy.
Hello, welcome to Top of the Pops. I'm so excited to be here.
Don't forget, Radio 1 FM has tonight's sound, and we kick off with Martika over here at number 12.
Hey, why don't you a bit more street and a bit more cred and get some other people in?
And you party? Wow! I think it was the beginning of a change for Top of the Pops.
The whole thing with the dance music was the actual artists were quite faceless, so they could never really perform. So performance went out the window.
I used to call them job centre bands. You felt when they knew they were in the charts, they went down the job centre and said, you first four, go out there to Top of the Pops and do the so-and-so number.
The business was changing, the music was changing, television was changing.
We needed to bring a fresh attitude to the production of the show, and so I approached a Radio 1 producer, Rick Blacksill.
It's either going to be, well, that guy's done all right and he saved it, or that guy's really cocked it up and he's killed it. I wanted to get it talked about again, and you'd sit at home and watch it, and there'd always be a band on that your parents wouldn't get, and there'd always be a band on that you loved seeing, and there'd always be something new on that quite excited you.
And it became evident to the audience there was something different happening on Top of the Pops.
All music's snobbery boundaries are broken when you're on Top of the Pops. You could have the maddest rap band to the most kind of petite, little singer, and that feeling had to be conveyed by the programme as a whole to a family audience.
Take That seemed to sum up the new excitement around the show.
It went from dull to being dumb, didn't it? We started it all. Back when we started, they were all faceless dance acts, and there was no way that anybody that was doing anything in the pop world, because the new kids on the block had been and they died, and now it was time for grunge and dance music.
There was a tremendous sense of excitement, about being involved with a group of young guys who were gorgeous. The record was #1, and I was a big part of that, a very special moment at Top of the Pops that day.
The whole Britpop thing was exploding, and there was like a great kind of surge of British talent coming through as well.
I see what I could do. It was an exciting time because the thing about it that was exciting was like the indie charts suddenly became the real charts. This stuff has now gone into the mainstream, and maybe this is going to make a difference.
But she didn't understand. But she just smiled and held my hand.
To me, Top of the Pops isn't really a programme about musical authenticity of like. It's more about just a kind of something that you watch when it's your tea, and some little things might catch your imagination. It is that pop thing rather than, he's playing the guitar really well.
I wanted to try and create a sense of event around the presentation as well. Just so in that 10 seconds of link between every song, that was almost as unpredictable as what could happen on the stage with the band.
Hello, we're Blur, we're #1, and we're going to be camping it up later on Top of the Pops.
I mean, I would never do it again. I wouldn't, not in a million years would I want to present Top of the Pops, but I did it then.
We have Sting, Oasis, 017.
There's a talking point around the country, Oasis and Blur. And purely by coincidence, the band booked on that week, when Damon was presenting as an exclusive act, was Oasis.
Hello, Mum.
So there is Damon having to introduce the band that he's supposedly kind of, you know, they've got a thing going together. There were quite a few hand signals going up from the Gallaghers behind Damon's head, and I think we had to go back and do that about 5 or 6 times.
And here are another 5 brave boys from Manchester. It's an exclusive. They're Oasis, and they're wonderful.
It wasn't a particularly gracious time, you know. Everyone was pretty bitchy about everyone else.
Mark Bolan, David Bowie, Slade, Jam, the Smiths, they all on Top of the Pops, Top of the Pops, Top of the Pops.
The show really hasn't even started and I already feel effervescent.
We wanted to get Chris Eubank on the show because you know he's going to provoke a reaction.
One special song by a special performer, itself singing Cecilia.
I tried to do all these introductions with F in the front of it and finishing up with thugs. And I think I got it right.
It was very difficult to start singing the song with a straight face.
Then came the ultimate pop machine, custom built for Top of the Pops, running on high-octane, 5-star girl power.
Hi, we're the Spice Girls!
The Spice Girls were fantastic. 5 characters, 5 bundles of personality. Always delivered, always made themselves available. Talent, ability, looks, attitude.
It was quite frustrating for us because, of course, we were so excited to be #1, but we were in Japan. And for the first 2 weeks, we had to do like a satellite thing.
now,
Remember?
yes.
What do you think about that? Now you know how I feel.
Say you can handle my love. Are you for real?
So I think all of us as youngsters growing up always used to watch Top of the Pops.
Well, I hope you like all your Christmas presents, and if not, keep the receipts and take them back.
On the Christmas show, you always have all the #1s. So I remember the Right Honourable Robbie Williams presented us.
Long live Pop and long live the Spice Girls.
God, you've got a
God,
good
I don't
memory.
remember that.
Well, we've had pregnancy though. When you have pregnancy, your memory goes.
I'll have your children.
I just remember lots of costume changes.
I got a request to keep my clothes on, and I'm seriously considering it.
Yeah. That was mostly Jerry, because she was into the costume thing. She was into the theatre of it.
If you put 2 and 2 together, you will see what our friendship is for.
1997 brought another new producer with an old-fashioned outlook.
It was a kind of back-to-basics approach, really. So thus, I brought the Led Zeppelin riff back as the theme tune, albeit with a kind of drum and bass remix. The logo, as you can see, is very kind of 60s stylized, you know. I wanted the music to speak for itself and cram as many bands as possible into the half hour.
You can have Steps, or you could have Oasis on next, you could have me on, or you can have a rock band, indie band, hip-hop band, and I don't really know where I'm going with this at all. I think it's good.
And here in the new millennium, it's not only us Brits who get our weekly chart fix. Top of the Pops now is global.
Prvýkrát na Slovensku.
Prvýkrát naživo.
Je to stále číslo 1. Je tu Top of the Pops.
I was really surprised that, for all the fact that the Top of the Pops is a great British invention, like, you know, football and fish and chips, that it wasn't really exploited. It wasn't really seen anywhere else.
Top of the Pop ในช่วงวันวาเลนไทน์นี้ค่ะ
I decided that the best way to do that was not to try and sell the British show to everyone, but to try and encourage each territory to build their own show.
¿Qué tal? Soy Ricky Martin. Sigue siendo el número 1. Sigue siendo Top of the Pops.
That has worked really successfully, and it goes out in 88 territories now, which is some success story.
Alles gut Geburtstag, yeah? Is that right?
The brand is very popular around the world.
Hallo, wie geht es dir? Ich heiße Jerry Halliwell. Alles gut Geburtstag. Tschüss. There you go. Oh, I forgot to say Top of the Pops.
There are probably, at a conservative estimate, weekly about 30 or 40 million people consuming Top of the Pops internationally, which means that it's bigger and badder and more successful than it ever was.
But wherever in the world you watch Top of the Pops, the basic idea is still the same. Just put the music right at the centre stage.
Johnny Stewart, the show's original producer, paid me the biggest compliment. He said, he spent the whole day with me at the studio, and he said, do you know what, Chris, it hasn't changed a bit. And that was fantastic, because that's exactly what I wanted to achieve. Because people have this rosy image of vintage Top of the Pops of the 60s and 70s, and I wanted to recreate that.
Top of the Pops, when it's been great, has almost always epitomised the person who's led the show. And the Chris Cowie years were like that, really. They were often brash, they were wild, they were rather unpredictable. And that's what Chris is like, actually. And when they were great because they had the spirit of Chris. He had just been there too long. And we felt that Top of the Pops had lost its way a bit. When we decided it was time to bring someone else in, we wanted someone who understood pop music, someone who had a proven understanding of the youth market, someone who could bring talent on, and someone else who understood how to reach out to the audience beyond TV with marketing. And do you know what? There was only really one person we felt who had that track record.
My name's Andy Peters and I'm the executive producer.
Good evening and welcome to the first all-new Top of the Pops.
We decided to make the show live. We also decided that actually it didn't matter if people were miming to music. That wasn't really important. The important thing was always to have great performance.
We were aiming for 16 to 24 to bring the show younger, so it became a completely different show.
The first 1 hour show at Television Centre was absolutely fantastic. And more importantly, the viewing figures went up.
I love the way you work it. Girlfriend, I'm gonna flip, reverse it. Come on, baby, what you gonna be?
The brief was to make it into an event.
When they took the OB up to Gateshead, I felt at last we were beginning to interact with the audience.
Spring breaks come around and there's more heroes to be found. There's something major going down on Tracy Island. Hello, hello, hola. We're at a place called Vertigo. Everything I wish I didn't know except you. Give me something I can feel.
We did U2 in the car park, and it was a great moment. Not only was there a crowd outside the gate, but it seemed that every single BBC employee in the whole of London had managed to get into TV Centre and were literally like hanging off the balconies looking down.
I think the relaunch was actually a very sort of big attempt to reach the teenage audience and to worry a bit less about the older audience. So although I think it was actually quite good for the teenage audience, they were already probably starting to go somewhere else with their music and their music choices.
The idea that you could actually kind of capture this audience again when their minds are elsewhere. You know, they're not into appointment TV. You know, they won't tune in at a particular time just to try and see what's top of the charts. I mean, they know that, and if they didn't know that, they can get it any minute of the day, any second of the day.
After 40 years on BBC One, the chart show Top of the Pops is to be dropped from the channel because of poor ratings. Some of the world's biggest pop stars, from the Rolling Stones to Madonna, have performed on the programme. It'll now be moved to a new slot on Sunday evenings on BBC Two.
Lorraine Heggessey was the controller of BBC One, and she had very firm ideas about Top of the Pops. She really believed that it was no longer engaging in the audience it was aimed at, young people.
A lot of people discuss the question about BBC One versus BBC Two, and if we just looked at sheer audience numbers, it had become more of a minority type of programme, and we thought that actually by bringing Top of the Pops together with Top of the Pops 2, there would then be kind of a dual play of people who like the nostalgia value and the fantastic archive of Top of the Pops and the live music continuing on a weekly basis.
Now there's a fair few greatest hits albums in the album chart at the moment, and the BBC has a huge archive of these, could have played any of them, but for some extraordinary reason has decided the one you want to hear most of all is Making Your Mind Up by Bucks Fizz.
So the idea was to use the archive. Top of the Pops 2 had worked so successfully on BBC Two, and then we started thinking about could we use different presenters who would have some of their personality. And sometimes that worked really, really well.
I can't feel a thing. I can't feel a thing. Next to Vaulty Towers.
The problem with Top of the Pops is the format wasn't working, and once that, or it wasn't appealing to people, once that has happened, you can get the Queen, you can get Prince William to present it, and you might get a 1 week effect, but in the long term it doesn't work.
Top of the Pops, a television institution for over 40 years, is to disappear from our screens. The BBC announced today that in a rapidly changing musical landscape, Top of the Pops no longer occupied the central role it once did.
There was some sort of leak to the press, which is incredibly accurate, about the plans to stop Top of the Pops. And so then it had to be announced because we didn't want to lie about it. We wanted to say, yes, we'd thought about it hard and we'd taken this quite big decision.
Nobody actually working on the show knew, and they found out by a telephone call to the office, a journalist saying, is the story on Media Guardian true? So it wasn't a very nice way for them to find out.
It was a decision by a mixture of me, the channels, commissioners, and the team itself as well, looking at what's the right future for our music coverage on BBC and BBC television.
I think there were people in the industry who thought that if Top of the Pops was in such a dire straits, that somebody might have called some key people within the industry and basically said, look, we've got a real problem here, what can we do to fix it? And I think the industry would have pulled out all the stops to try and do something.
There's an old trick in television which is called selling ice cream in winter, and they've done it with various programs. And what you do is you've got a program that's failing and the slot it's in, so you move it into a series of incredibly hopeless slots where it does even worse, and then you say, look, there's no demand. And I think its supporters will believe that's what's happened to it.
You know, all of our parents can remember like when they were kids and watching their favourite bands and stuff. It's like the one show that everybody, you know, all the biggest bands in the world want to do.
You know, Top of the Pops has been going for so long, you expect it to be around forever. And although every couple of years there's conversations that, oh, have you heard Top of the Pops is coming off the air, you don't actually expect it to happen.
I don't feel that bad about it, actually, because I'm part of the generation, of course, who remembers when I was growing up, my favourite band, The Clash, wouldn't go on Top of the Pops because it was so naff. But we kind of love it, despite itself. It's a bit like, you know, people say that Walt Disney's frozen somewhere. Top of the Pops is kind of being frozen for a period, I think.
You just miss watching it, don't you? Seeing who's number one on a Sunday night now.
Every singer, every group, every artist said, you know, am I going to get on Top of the Pops?
Please, please, BBC, bring Top of the Pops back.
I think it will come back at some point, not for the next couple of years, but can never say no.